Before we get into this episode, the 100th episode of Decision Space, just a quick note. I want to give a big thank you to my co-host, Brendan Hansen, who hauled his recording gear all the way across the country so that we could get you this episode on time. Unfortunately, he left his mic stand, so he had to hold his microphone up, trying to keep it steady away from his mouth the whole time. For that reason, the audio is not quite as crisp as normal. You'll hear a few pops, especially early in the podcast, but pretty minor stuff. You'll still enjoy the episode. Sounds pretty good overall, but just wanted to let you know what was going on with that. Now, please enjoy.
Talking back. Welcome to Decision Space, the only show to take place right here in the space between the turns in your favorite games. I'm Brendan Hansen.
I'm Jake Friedman.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
And today we are here at episode 100 of Decision Space. Incredible. We did not think that this would happen, but here we are. And in this episode, we are going to think about the next 100 episodes of Decision Space and just some general ideas of things we might want to do more, things we might want to do less, some of the games we might cover. But before any of that, we're going to start off by just doing a little discussion of some of the games that we have been enjoying over our end of year holiday break from the show. And Brendan, how are you doing?
I am doing great, Jake. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. And it's always fun, end of the year game playing. I don't know about you, but I typically just get together with groups that I would never get together with throughout the year, which means maybe playing games that I wouldn't get to play or playing games with people who I don't often get to play games with, which can kind of recontextualize them. So I'm really excited to chat about some of the games that I've been playing. And I'm curious to hear about some of yours too. Some of these I didn't even know that you had on any interest in. So I'm excited.
Yeah, like you, I spent the holidays back home in Kansas, so some of that was playing with my family and some of my friends from back home there, but definitely not my normal gaming circle here in St. Louis.
That's awesome. So how do you want to do this? Should we spitfire back and forth, one and one?
Yeah,
do you want to do a section?
Yeah, let's do that first. Okay, so the first game that I'm going to talk about, and the game that has been kind of the big hit for me over the holiday break, was Blokus or Blokus, and that is the sort of mass market retail game of playing blocks onto a stark white board. So if you're unfamiliar with this game, as I was prior to receiving it as a holiday gift, and it was a gift I requested off the recommendation of Jim D in our Discord, also a Patreon supporter, who suggested that I might really like it, and he was absolutely right. So this is a great game to teach people because it essentially has one rule. You're just trying to place as many of your blocks on the board as possible. There are these kind of tetromino pieces. Paul Solomon would be happy. I think they got all of the 5 square shapes in there, I hope. And anyway, all you do is you place them on the board, and they have to share a corner with at least one of your other pieces on the board, and they can't share a side at all. So literally that's the whole game, and you're just filling up the grid, and at the end of the game, you're out when you can't place any more of your tiles because you don't have any space for them. And then the winner is simply the person that has the fewest squares on unplaced tiles remaining at the end. So it's just, you can just get started with it right away. It takes 20 minutes to play. And I played it with 2 different groups. The first time we just, we're going to play really quick, ended up playing 3 games back to back. And then the second group, I went over to a couple of Bridget and I's really close friends for dinner. They wanted to play a different game first. And I brought Blokus. I thought they would like it. And it was kind of late. I was like, should we go or play? It's like, oh, we'll try it once. And we played it. And then Jeff's like, can you stay and let's play one more time? And so, it just made me feel really good that he enjoyed it so much. And it's a total blast. Have you played Blokus, Brendan?
I haven't. I have not played it. I've seen it before, and I know that there are ardent fans of this game. I think it's Blokus, isn't it?
It's
like block.
Do you play? It's Blokus. So
okay, nice.
If it was Blockus, then for sure. But I feel like
sure.
It's ambiguous.
It's a game for blokes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this game, Jake, you play a color. Is that the idea? So you're all playing to the same shared
Yeah,
board in the
right.
middle. Yeah.
Yeah. So not
Interesting.
colorblind friendly because it's like red,
Yeah.
green, blue, and yellow.
Like pretty specifically. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it seems really interesting though that so many of the polyomino games that we've covered on the show are personal play space games, right? Where I'm working on my own polyomino puzzle. So it's so cool that this game is sort of like almost a area conflict game,
Yeah.
but played with polyominoes. And you said all five. So they're the Tetris pieces specifically, right? The Tetronymos. So it's like
Yeah.
the
So
little
it has
Z and
all
the
the
L,
fives. So you get like, like
all the
12,
fours.
12 five pieces, all the fours.
Oh, okay.
Then you've got just the
Gotcha.
two threes, the one, two, and then a single one piece. And it's really
Nice.
fun because like the way it works where you can place like corner to corner. It's like if there's just
Yeah.
like sometimes there's like a very small opening, but if you can fit one of your pieces into, then perhaps that will like present a corner into like this unclaimed territory part of the board. So it has this sort of way of feeling like, oh, I'm out of this and doing really bad. And it's like, wait, I can like fit this piece here, and that can like open up these other possibilities for me. And so much of the game sort of revolves around creating the opportunity for you to do that in the late game, and then of course like seeing what opportunities your opponent might have, and positioning your pieces in a way to, you know, block them off. So yeah,
Nice.
very much a game where it feels like the first time you're just kind of playing chaotically, but has that like really nice emergent strategy where you're like, oh, I think, I see my mistake. I'm going to try things a little differently.
Nice. Blokus sounds really cool. This is definitely one that I'd like to give a
I
try.
think you'd really dig it.
Yeah. Okay. The fact that it plays in 20 minutes, that's enticing. That's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
quick little experience. That's cool.
totally.
Okay, so my next game was one that I was very excited about. I was also traveling for the holidays. So I flew all the way across the country. I live in the East Coast of the United States to the West Coast, in Portland, Oregon, where I grew up. And I wanted a game that I could play with family and with friends. So I had a game shipped here. And I learned about this game. It's a 2021 game, but it's called Quest. And it's a Don Eskridge game, who you probably know for games like The Resistance and The Resistance Avalon. So Quest started off as an expansion for Resistance Avalon, but then eventually they sort of realized, Dawn did, that it needed to be spun off into its own game. So Quest is the standalone reimagining of the system of the Resistance and Resistance Avalon. So you have a lot more, you have unique roles like that were added in Avalon. There are 5 missions that you go on. But that's kind of where things diverge, because there's no voting. If you're familiar with the Resistance and Resistance Avalon, someone will nominate a team of people who go on the missions. Then everyone will vote on if you want those teams to go or not. Quest says, no, we're getting rid of that. There's no voting. So rather than get into the nitty gritty, I think I'll say how Quest feels different than those games. And one of the major ways, 2 big ways. One is that it's quicker. It's definitely a streamlined experience. If the Resistance could play in 30 minutes at times, or 40 minutes even if you have a slow group, Quest is done in 20, almost always, because it strips out that voting. And then the other huge difference is that in those games, historically, the Resistance and Resistance Avalon, the majority of players at this table skew towards being the good team, the good side of things. So there's this defaulted expectation that everyone's good. And when you're lying, you're always taking the position that, oh, I'm good. And that's just sort of assumed. That dynamic's gone in Quest, because it's either even at the table or skewed towards the evil side. And there's some other mechanics that make it such that both sides sort of want to subvert their identity. It's not that just players are assumed to be good, because there's an opportunity for both sides to win in the end, no matter how the missions go, if certain players or the whole group of players for the good side can guess who evil players are. So the table ends up being a lot more tense, it's quiet, and that subversion of expectations around just sort of a default position of people at the table really changes the dynamic. I will say I was very excited to play Quest. I don't know that Quest is a game that I would recommend for people who have not played the Resistance or Resistance Avalon. It seems like sort of not a next step, but sort of a game that people who have experience with those core systems and want something to mix it up will bring. We had a lot of fun with this game on our 3rd and 4th play. Our 1st and 2nd plays were really trying to figure out what ways we could push in this system, and where the game kind of lived and how the relationships socially existed. I think Quest is more interesting than it is fun,
I think you
perhaps.
sort of answered what my question was going to be, because I think one of the great things about traditional resistance is it's really easy to onboard people, because you can literally say in the teach, like, you want people to know that you're good. And it's
Yep.
so easy to just like cling on to that. And literally everyone in the game should be trying to do that, which perhaps create something that could feel like a stale meta after like countless games of it. But I think that's also what makes that game so fun, intuitive, and feel so authentic to like the human experience, where you generally want to be seen as the good guy in life. And, you know, when people are accusing you of being bad, that feels really awful. And I think, you know, that's something that I think makes that such an important game that I always recommend everyone should try at least once. And so for the potential that that is lessened in Quest makes me less excited about it.
Totally. I think the Resistance and Resistance Avalon are the popular mainstream movie versions of this system, and Quest is like the art house film version, where it's doing interesting things. But I will say, you kind of nailed it, Jake. The teach was pretty rough. Maya and I played, so my wife, who has tons of Resistance experience, so we picked it up fairly quickly. We were playing with a cousin of mine who played a ton of Avalon, and the two of my aunts who had no social deduction experience. And that was really tough because there's this system where, instead of voting, the core mechanism of extracting information is this magic spell that the person who creates the mission casts that forces players to succeed the mission. But if they're Morgan Le Fay, they can ignore it. Or if they're this other role called the youth, then they have to fail automatically. So that becomes a really potent tool once you kind of wrap your head around all the roles that exist in the ecosystem. So it has that problem of, this is a hidden information game, so you can't reveal what your role is. So if you have a question, you're going to have to look it up in the rulebook on your own. It was just a little fiddly until we picked it up. It was cool. I'm really glad I experienced it. I'd want to play it again, but with a group of people who've played the Resistance 30 times or something.
Yeah.
Like that's where the sweet spot would be. So that's Quest by Don Eskridge.
My next game that I played was Longshot, the dice game. This will be much quicker. If you're not familiar, Longshot, the dice game, is a roll and write game about betting on horses at a horse race. And I picked this one up because I was gifted a gift certificate to a game shop in Lawrence, and I had the opportunity to host a little game night at my parents' house where we had 6 people attending.
Nice.
So I need, you know, that 6 is such a tricky player count, because I didn't want to do just only party games, right? People are coming over to play a board game. And at the same time, this is like all old friends, people I want to spend time with. So I don't want to do the just like, okay, we're going to do us 3 and I'm only going to interact with like 2 of the people I invite over. So I
Yeah.
was looking around at the game shop for something, and I found Longshot, the dice game. I've heard great things about it, so I was excited to pick it up, and it felt like the perfect game to fill that niche. And it was pretty fun. I don't think I was like, I'm not nearly as enthusiastic about this game after one play as I've heard a lot of other people be. I felt like it was a little bit less chaotic and
Mm.
exciting as I wanted it to be. The way the game works is you do one roll and then everybody around the table takes an action, and that's how a lot of these roll and write games work. But unlike a game like Quicks, where everybody just like does it on their sheet, here player order really matters, because you can do
Mm.
things like buy the horse, and if you do that, then nobody else can do it. And so you really have to go around the circle each time, which doesn't take a tremendous amount of time, but it did like feel halting enough that it didn't feel like we were just like, it felt like more of a game about like sort of the analysis of checking off your sheets than a game of like rolling dice
Mm.
and seeing like which horse is going to win and betting on them. So that was sort of the vibe of the game. And my other potential issue, and I only played it once, so I think this is something that could not happen every time. One of the things on your sheet is concession stands, and you like can fill up this grid of 4 by 4, and whenever you complete a row or column, you get a special action. And it felt like everybody in our game had either completely filled up their concessions or like had very nearly filled it up. And when you do that, you get a lot of different special actions, some of which are like moving back horses. So I think
Mm,
everybody used up like all their moving back horses actions in the whole game, which made it so that the game just really kind of dragged a lot at the
mm,
end. So basically, at the end, the game ends when 3 horses cross the finish line, and the first 2 happen like really quickly. And I'm like, this is great. This is like exactly what I wanted. And then it was like a full, I don't know, 30 more minutes or something before the third horse went across, or maybe longer. It
wow.
took a while, and so just like that halting at the end made the tempo feel off. But I've talked to some people about that experience who said like they've never seen that, or like that's
Mm,
exceedingly rare that you would have a game state. Maybe it came down to the way the dice were rolled for us, or just like an oddly even distribution of horses getting rolled. But either way, sort of, everyone had a fun time. It was good, but it wasn't great, and I think so. I was a little disappointed for that.
yeah, that's totally fair. I think I expected it to be more boisterous than it sounds like it was, which it was sort of what you were going for. So a bummer to kind of
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
mismatch
like
of
I
expectations.
thought it'd be like, let's go blue horse, go orange horse, but like there was so much time between each roll that it felt like difficult to get like super
Mm,
amped up for the rolls.
that
Maybe
makes sense.
fewer players would be better.
Would you are you excited to try it again? Or are you sort of like, we'll see?
That's a good question. I feel like I'll probably want to try it at least one more time,
Yeah,
but I feel like if it's similar, the next time I might be out on it.
probably not headed to the winner's circle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, interesting. I'm glad to sort of hear about Longshot from you because I feel like our tastes in roll and rights tend to align. So maybe I'll pass on that one until you play it again.
Yeah. I'll let you
Okay.
know if I do give it another shot and what I think.
Nice. So from Jake, that was Longshot, the dice game. I'm going to group together some other games because some of them I've talked about on the show a little bit already, and I don't know that I need to drag. So we'll do kind of like quick reports with those. But one game that I ended up going to a ton because I found myself in lots of large groups was not a board game, but a party game, and it is Celebrity. This game has a lot of names. People know it as Celebrity or Salad Bowl or monikers, the sort of published version. I think Time's Up is another app-based version that people have. So we call it Celebrity, or I keep going. Mythgow, Botticelli. There's lots of names for this game. This is a game where everyone writes names onto pieces of paper, and you put them in a bowl. You split up into two teams, and you play it over 3 rounds. Where in the first round, you can do anything, you can say anything except for the words that are written on the cards, and you can act things out, trying to get your teammates to guess what's written on the cards. The second round, you can say just one word and act it out. And the final round, you can't say any words trying to get them to guess what's on the paper. You can just act them out, but you build up this core of knowledge as you move through the bowl. So I love this game. Having the opportunity to play Celebrity is always an incredible joy. So it was a blast to get to play them. We played it with a few different groups and different sizes. And one of the groups that we were in was sort of game for trying out something that I'd never tried before, which is that we had everyone add one new slip each round to add a little bit of uncertainty, because when we played with this group, we were getting to a bad habit of just shouting out things we knew were left in the bowl. So I came up with this idea of everyone should just add one new one, and it would increase the challenge level a little bit for us too in the final round to have to be miming out things that we didn't know. And the uncertainty around that was sort of fun. I don't know if it's how I'd always want to play Celebrity, but it was a nice way to mix things up for a group we played it twice and wanted to play a third time, and kind of throw a little wrench in the regular pace of the game.
Super try hard group there, just like
Yeah,
memorizing
exactly.
every. I mean, that's what's
Yeah.
also like great about the game, right? Is it's like sort of like you create inside jokes with your group of friends within 30 minutes or whatever, which is like such a fun shared experience. But yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely doesn't necessarily hold up to memorizing and calling out things that might still be in there. But I think the better solution to that is just more alcohol.
Yeah, which was effective too. But I will say that mixed with adding new tickets, like watching my friend act out Charizard in the final round without us having any idea that was what was in there, pretty great experience. That went over pretty
Does
well.
sound fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome
S-
game.
yeah. So that was Celebrity.
Cool. So the party game that I've been playing over break, in those situations, is Poetry for Neanderthals. Have you heard of this game? Have I talked about this on the
Only
podcast?
you mentioned it one time as a game
Yeah.
that I think you bought your mom.
Exactly. So, oh yes, that was the game I was gonna get my mom, and I
Yeah,
did. So we played it with my family, and then I played it with that same group of 6 people when they came over. And this game is just like so good. I recommend it extremely highly. It's a bit of an odd one in that it's public. It's another mass market game published by Exploding Kittens,
nice.
which is a game I probably a lot of people are familiar with. Not my favorite game in the world, but this one sort of fits into that line of games, which I feel like has like a really strong design ethos of just like creating like funny and fun experiences, right? The same company that does Throw Burrito, where you have to like
Yep.
do burrito duels and you're tossing these burrito plushes at each other, um, which is like it's a little bit of a different thing than the Agricolas of the world, but it's still just like such fun party game experience. So anyway, the gimmick of Poetry for Neanderthals, which is so simple and so pure, is that you're essentially doing a charades or a celebrity style game where you have words on cards that you're trying to get your team to guess. Except for in Poetry for Neanderthals, you can only use one syllable words to get them to guess, right?
Wow.
So if I said, if I want my team to guess moon, I might say like dark sky, small,
Shine.
round, bright,
Awesome.
and
Yeah,
it's just so funny, like how, explain these things are so funny, right? It really makes you sound silly and just gets people
totally.
laughing right away. But if you were to say a 2-syllable word on accident, like I did when I was trying to get my team to guess moon, live, I said, small circle. And then what happens when you accidentally say a 2-syllable word is somebody on the other team standing behind you with an inflatable club bonks you on the head, and you have to put the card into the -1 point instead of the +1 point. Or if you get the harder version, each card has like a simple word and then like more complex, so like maybe it'd be like moon or like full moon. So if you get them to guess
Nice.
the full phrase, then it's worth 3 points. And that's the whole game. You just go around. There's a sand timer so you're seeing how many words you can get in a minute without messing up. And it's just a total blast every time I played it. Just like so many laugh out loud moments. The type of game where it's like failing is just hilarious, but also like succeeding can be really funny too. It's such a gimmick, such a simple idea, but it really just works incredibly well. And it hasn't missed yet for me. It's just a really fun party game experience.
That sounds hilarious. It also sounds like you could very easily make this at home just by writing your own words and then using a pillow or something
Oh, for
to
sure.
be the
Yeah.
club. Yeah, I kind of want to. That sounds like it'd be right up my alley as like a celebrity variant. Basically, that sounds really cool. And I
Yeah.
want to describing like the moon with single. That sounds hilarious. But also, if you went into philosophy type stuff where it's like describe communism with single syllable words,
Oh,
that sounds
yeah.
like it'd be a really funny challenge or
That
something
would
like
be
that. You
funny.
know?
The
Yeah.
the funny thing too about it that we were finding is like there's no, in monikers or celebrity, it's really easy to like know what's going to be a very difficult thing to act out.
Yeah.
Whereas like in this game, it's some words are just incredibly hard to describe using 1-syllable words, where others are not. Like somebody got, I got like chain or something, and I just like for the life of me could not think of like 1-syllable words because it's like metal, right? It's like everything I
Yeah.
want to like say about it is like it's just hard for some reason, where other sometimes like complex phrases are quite easy. So I think that also made it like fun because like people get stumped on like what seem like very simple, like easy words, which are in reality aren't.
Yeah.
And more difficult, complex phrases can just be quite simple because you could just say a full sentence to say what it is, no problem.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it's fun, man.
Poetry for
You should
Neanderthals.
check it out, whether making it yourself or picking up a copy at whatever your local game store slash retail mass
Target.
market retail. Yeah, Target.
Yeah, that's awesome. Super cool. So, yeah, I really want to give Poetry for Neanderthals a try. I'm going to group my next 3 games in the interest of time together, Jake. These are all games I've talked about before. So it'll just be a quick overview. I also played Blue Lagoon a tile laying game from Reiner Knizia where you're played over 2 rounds, sort of filling up this board where the first round you have a ton of freedom, and the second round you're playing from a few special locations that are your little houses you put on the board. And this game's just delightful. I played it at 3. I think it's very strong at 3 and 4, a little bit loose at 2. There's not enough conflict in the board. And I think for me, the sweet spot really is at 3, where you can creatively path and control space. So I love that game. It was a really good play. I also introduced my aunt to Azul, which Azul perhaps needs little introduction, but it's a tile drafting and placing game where you're filling up this grid with 5 different colors of tiles. And Azul is fun because teaching Azul, you kind of see the gears click for someone as the rounds go on. It's sort of like, oh, I get it, especially by the end of the final game. So that was a blast. And then we also played some Enchanted Plumes, my card game that's just, relaxing for us, sort of a comfort game in the family. So a couple nights we would just get home kind of late and sort of say, let's play one game before bed. So that was a lot of fun. And I got to, typically mine, I will play it at 2, but I got to play it at 3 players a bunch. And that was a nice change for me. You get to shuffle in 7s, and I like playing with 7s.
Let's see. So the last game I was going to talk about is Nertz. 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 Brendan,
Never played Nertz.
Do you know what this is?
Okay, so this is one of those games where I know the name,
okay.
I know the title, but I don't know anything about Nertz besides that it's just a classic card game.
Yeah, so it's a classic card game. I don't know how many people you can play it with. We played it with 4. I guess you could, presumably you could play it with any number, but everybody needs their own deck of playing cards with their own unique backs. So basically what it is solitaire, but played competitively. So you have like a stack of 13 cards, and you flip up the top one face up. Then you have 4 face up cards just like you would have in regular solitaire. And then you have the rest of your deck that is face down, and you can flip up just like 3 and only play the top card from the 3 into your solitaire stacks. However, the thing that makes it a competitive game is that whenever somebody gets an ace, they can put it or have to put it into the middle of the table. So, if everybody's playing solitaire on their own like edge of the table, the middle is just like this communal space. So if somebody puts an ace of spades into the middle, then if you have the 2 of spades, you can put yours on top of that. And that's like a race to do it, because if somebody else gets there first, then you're stuck out until the next ace of spades comes out. And basically the first person to empty their stack of 13 cards gets to call Nertz, and you'd empty it by either playing it into your own solitaire stack or playing to the middle. And then that triggers the end game, or the game just immediately ends, and then you score points, basically 1 point for each card that you've played into the middle over the course of the game, minus 1 point for all the cards in your like original pile of 13 that you haven't played. And you can and if you're the one who called Nertz, I think you get like a 10-point bonus, and you play to 100. So the scores in our games range from like 3 points to like 36 in a round or something like that. But it's just like really interesting type of, I don't, it's like, I almost like hesitate to call it decision space. What it really is just like this game of multitasking where you're like trying to keep an eye on the middle while also like playing your own games separately from that. And I found it impossible to do well at. I was terrible at it, as was my buddy Jeff. He was even worse than me, fortunately. But his wife Christina and my wife Bridget had like a really epic battle where Christina won with Bridget at like 92, while Jeff and I were at like 30 and like 24 points respectively at the end of the game. But yeah, I think it's like it was fun to be taught and play like a more traditional old school card game. I think this is one that a lot of people just like know of, a family game. I think it even like comes on maybe like Windows devices as like something you can just play free. But yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I think I would recommend playing it as a different kind of more chill out traditional card game experience. Not chill while you're playing it, but it has like a good tempo where like you're
for
playing
the
it, it's like
evening.
totally head down, but then you have to like shuffle up all the cards and play again. And you can like sort of like exhale and laugh about what happened.
Nertz sounds super cool. In the level of chaos of with Rummy being the least chaotic sort of, and Egyptian Rat Screw being the other end of the spectrum, where does Nertz fall? Are we like a 7?
Yeah, it's like a
I
7.58 on that
Okay,
scale.
on
I think because
chaos level. Yeah.
there are like people's hands getting slapped on accident, or like
Nice. Yeah, yeah.
like people are like, oh no, I got mine first. Like no, you know what I mean? Like that card was there first. Yelling and exasperation. That's definitely going on here.
That's super cool. And I also will say, I haven't heard of a game where like you each start with your own deck like that. Or I
Yeah.
haven't played a game like that. And that's a really novel concept where you're playing your own puzzle, but you have something in the middle. Very
Yeah,
cool.
it was like when they were describing, they're like, "Oh, it's like solitaire, but it's competitive, so you'll like it." That's what I was like. Okay,
Jake was like,
and
I have a podcast about that.
yeah, I was like, okay, what
Yeah.
I was like, that doesn't really make intuitive sense, like competitive solitaire, but that's exactly what it is, and really what it
Nice.
feels like to play.
That's awesome. Cool. So that's Nerds.
Yeah. So anyway, it was, I didn't do a ton of gaming over the past 10 days, to be honest. That was pretty much the exhaustive list of it, but still had a blast playing those games. So thank you for playing with me if you're listening to this podcast now.
Yeah. So I think this will be a really natural segue into this sort of next section that we're doing, Jake, because we essentially just did a more sort of personal storytelling. What was our experience with games recently? And I think that what we want to do in this next section of the show is talk about what we want to do in the next 100 episodes. And then in the first half, and then in the second half of the second half, talk about some games that we might cover or that we might be excited to cover in the new year to get you all excited about them. And then maybe you can play along with us as we plan. But so in thinking about games, things that we want to do, I know one thing we want to do a lot more of is bring a little bit more of our own personal game playing experiences in. Typically, we just cover games in deep dives or we're talking topically about games. And I think both Jake and I feel that there's an opportunity to a little bit bring in more stories of personal play experiences that offer a slightly different perspective of the games that we cover. Not that we don't love the way that we typically cover games on the show and really enjoy those conversations, but games are big. And I think having more room to discuss games in all their facets seems really exciting to us.
Yeah, exactly. I think, as I think back over the last 100 episodes of Decision Space, I think we did like a really good job. Let's pat ourselves on the back about covering all these games. But I think that like sometimes they can feel like a little bit sterile when we're doing like the
Mm.
game deep dives, right? We're like, okay, now we're uh and that's not to say it's bad that we have notes, that we like have a format that we stick to, but I just think like perhaps we can do a better job of like conveying the emotional aspect of game playing by bringing in a little bit more storytelling of like uh I had this experience playing the game, and it made me feel like this, which is like the most sterile way of possible of putting that, but
I think back to the episode where Jake, you talked about Power Grid, and
mhm.
I talked about a game of Babylonia that we played. And the discussion of Power Grid, it wasn't a classic deep dive, but I felt like having never played that game, that I got a really clear sense for how it would feel to play that game. And I think those are the sort of stories we're trying to bring in. And then that same episode, we talked about Babylonia, and I ended up talking about how we'd played in teams. And then we got to have that sort of interesting conversation about team play and how we both sort of you viewed that as an abomination to the table. And I thought that it was a really cool way to like have people learn and teach the
Uh-huh.
game, experience the game. So I think that if you're trying to get a sense for what Jake and I are talking about, it's bringing in more stories kind of like those episodes. Yeah,
Yeah,
Jake?
exactly. I think less, this is how my gameplay played out. First, I played this card with my strategy being
You're right.
X, and then my opponent played this card, which meant I had to shift my strategy to this. And at the end, I got the achievement, which gave me 15 points. I won by 1 point. I don't think a lot of times like those stories of our own individual gameplay is like as compelling as we want it to be, but more so like, where was I when I was playing this game? Who was I with? Who was I playing against? that type of
Yeah.
storytelling. And
What was the emotional experience of the
and
arc
even
of
like
this game?
and what did I get to eat after,
Yeah.
like that type of thing, I think actually adds a lot of nuance to the type of conversation that we want to have, that really heightens our decision space lens more so than it runs counter to it.
Yep.
And I
Totally.
think going right along with that, I want to try and, in addition to telling stories about games, gamers, the people we play with, and that, I think like trying to bring ourselves into the show a little bit more as characters is something that could potentially benefit the show and our audience. I think a lot of times we sort of like, people come to this show for our opinions and analysis, and I think that's like fantastic. But I think a lot of times we sort of like have interesting conversations prior to and after about, just like what have we been up to, like how, like Brendan, how was your break, that type of stuff that doesn't always like make the cut for our episode. And I think perhaps like bringing more of that in is a good idea,
Mm.
because I think like for me, that's like one of the most valuable things about doing the show is like spending time chatting with you, and I think if we like, to the amount that we feel comfortable bringing in more of our life, both by doing kind of what we just did, like talking about like the games that we actually played outside of, the game we're sort of like had to play for the feature show. So bring in more episodes like that about just like recent plays, like what we're actually up to, but also like, your sort of journey in game design, like what's going on with that. I think I'd love to hear that, if you're working on new games, if I am, I think, more stuff around the ebb and flow, challenges with game design, challenges with playing games in real life with friends and game groups and stuff. I think that's something like we can and should bring more into the show in the next
Yeah.
100 episodes.
I think that that's really exciting, Jake, and I'm totally on board with that as well. I will say I feel like I'm sort of in a unique position right in this moment that makes me excited for 2023 with the playtest, the unofficial, maybe to be renamed game, and the Empire still like in actual active development. There's lots of things that I'm thinking about that I sort of want to share with the audience, and I know if I don't take the chance to talk about them, I'll forget, right? And so it's this sort of like special moment where I'm working really hard on this game and I'm really proud of what's happening. And I want to share that and sort of talk about the problems that I've had and ways that I've approached trying to solve it and the ups and downs of that. I think that might be a candid way to bring a lot of interest and value. And also for me, useful to sort of reflect. And I think the audience would be interested. And I know you'd be interested in hearing more about it. So that's a win. I think the audience will come along. As long as Jake's interested, the audience is interested.
Yeah, I think people have really responded well, especially in the Discord whenever we've done an episode that focuses more on design.
Yeah,
Even though that's not necessarily fitting exactly in with like the lens of the show as we originally thought about it, I think that's okay. It's something that people like. I think it adds value, and I think people find it interesting, and not least of all, it's something we find interesting. So
totally.
if we want to do it, I think we should give ourselves the license to have a little bit more leeway and push into that space. We can
Definitely.
always
I
pull
think
back if people are like, "All right, enough."
too much. Yeah.
We actually don't like you guys that much. Get back to talking about games, please.
Games. Yeah. I think this kind of goes along with that to some extent, which is that I feel like in the last quarter to third of this past year, Jake, we kind of pushed away from doing some of the more thoughtful topical episodes where not I think early on, some of the conversations that we would have exploring concepts and ideas, we went in knowing that we would find the definitions of things together and
Hmm.
kind of settle into the experience. And I think somewhere in the second half of these first 100 episodes, I feel like we began to feel pressure to have all the answers at the start, with which both changed the way the show went and changed how we experience feedback about the episodes in a way that maybe hurt the quality of conversation overall and made us less willing to have those conversations in a way that kind of bums me out. I'm
Hmm.
thinking about we did that episode on mechanical artifice, and there was tons of conversation after the fact, and I think there was a perception from some small percentage of vocal minority who is sort of like, you guys are claiming you have all the answers, but you clearly don't. And I think that I just want to be really clear that we want to have those conversations, but also make it clear that we're talking to figure out the answers. So we won't always be coming with all the answers, and we won't always finish every episode with all the answers. But I think that that's okay, because so much of this show, Decision Space, is about the journey of exploration and exploring games and learning, not knowing things and feeding that directly to each other
Yeah.
or to the audience, you know?
Yeah, I love that, being sort of like intentional about pushing back against expectations that we know anything. I'm always there for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think you're right. It's something I think not that we made that intentional choice, but subconsciously when you're recording your first ever episode that 37 people are going to listen to if you're lucky, if you can get mom and dad and a couple of your fantasy football friends to listen to, is a little different than when you're, and thank you all for listening, but like getting something somewhere, in the realm of 1,000 people downloading and
Yeah.
listening to the episode. I think that does put some pressure on us to, feel like, yeah, we're coming to this episode with definitions and answers. And if I think on a couple of those we sort of like ended it, it's like, I don't know if we had any like clear takeaways, and that kind of felt bad at the
Yeah.
time, where I feel like, if we're going to say, it's like, yeah, we're gonna one of the topics that we've sort of been thinking about a little bit in the discourse, like, what is an elegant game? Like, what does elegance in games? And it's part of me is like, oh, we shouldn't touch that with like a 10-foot pole, because there's no one answer, right? There's no way we can like come up with like a definitive thing that's gonna tick all the boxes for everybody. But perhaps having a conversation about elegance, about the challenges with this term, and like the misconceptions about like, it doesn't mean just one thing. It can mean all these different things, different people, in and of itself could be a valuable discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we wouldn't have started this podcast if we didn't think that there was a lot of value to be had in having conversations.
Right.
Like, after all, that's what we're here to do. So we should do it. Like, I want to talk to you about elegance. So we should just talk about elegance. And we'll have new answers, and maybe they won't be the perfect answers, but that'll be an interesting conversation. And yeah, we'll learn things about our own tastes too. And like you said, there's a reason why people have debates about things, and it's that different people feel different ways about subjective concepts like elegance in
Right.
game.
Yeah. And I think along with that, though, is the important like distinction that like we don't want to just be like pedantic, right? It's like not all about the definition, I guess. I was having
Totally.
a conversation with some people about Marvel Snap in a group I'm
Mm,
in. It's like a group chat. And it was basically like I was getting frustrated because people were like talking about like different like archetypes in the
mm,
game, and like, oh, are these like different archetypes? Like, oh, that's not an archetype, that's just like a deck. And it's like, okay, but like, the whole conversation to me just felt like very frustrating, about people be like, no, you're wrong, like there's only like 4 different archetypes, and like some of these fit into the same ones. And I was like, okay, but those all feel like kind of like aggro. It's like, there's no aggro in this game. Like, okay, you know what I mean? Like sometimes like things can just go too far with just like people fighting over like what terms to use and when. So
drawing lines.
I
Yeah.
think there is sort of like an expectation of that in the board game hobby,
Mm,
about
hmm.
like that's like what these kind of conversations are. That's like how they go. So I think like sometimes that can sort of like get brought in as an expectation people are like carrying into the episodes with, that can sort of lead to those like challenging criticisms that we often get. So I think just being upfront that like that's not what we're striving to do.
Yeah. An elegant conversation about elegance.
There
Well,
you
that's what we'll
go.
call the episode. There we go. Okay, Jake, what else do you want to do in the
Well,
next 100 episodes?
I mean, I think this is like a long-standing goal, but I really enjoy the episodes we've done that have guests on them in general, and I think especially guests that offer a diverse viewpoint. Right? It's
Yeah.
like I think one of my favorite episodes of all time was the one we did with like CT Nguyen, and that was fantastic because he was bringing in like a perspective around philosophy,
Yep.
which made that I think such a you know interesting and rich conversation. And that's not to say we don't want guests like from other podcasts and folks like that. I think that is a ton of fun too. So it's just like more guests in general. And I want our friends that we've had on the show before, to come back. We got
Yeah.
Paul,
Pulse.
Jamie, Carly, Tony Favor, CT
Yeah.
Nguyen. All y'all are welcome back. But also like maybe we bring some new folks into the fold too, and get their takes and opinion. Maybe it's an artist, right? Talking about
Yep.
art and game and what that matters, or a musician or a professional athlete, something like that. Like those are the folks that I think would be really fantastic to get on the show and see how their expertise like outside of the game realm, or maybe from a different aspect. Like we had the developer guy on too, a different like
Alex
part
Cutler.
of the game world than what we typically operate in, as sort of like this weird theory side of enjoying games. That I
Yeah.
think that would be great. So let's
It
do more
sounds
of that.
It sounds like one of the themes is like broadening horizons slightly, like pulling the lens back to be inclusive of all aspects as much as we are just focused on this niche that we've carved out. And I think the niche that we've carved out isn't going anywhere. Decision space will still be decision space, but we'll just save time to pull the lens back a little bit more and take looks at other perspectives too.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great way to sort of put this idea of, if the first 100 episodes about like zooming in and zooming in and zooming in,
Yeah.
maybe the next 100 is we're slowly pulling back out and like seeing like what else can we like incorporate into this lens and show and ideas.
Totally. And okay, so last year around this time, I stated a goal of us trying to get to 100,000 downloads by episode 100. We're not quite there. We're going to be around 90,000 downloads, which is still pretty close to the goal and something that I think we should both feel really proud of.
Dude, way better than I thought we'd do when you set that
I
goal. I
set that
remember
goal. I
being like,
remember.
no, that's not
Jake
happening.
was like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. So that's really exciting. I think both of us, I hope that I can speak for you in this moment, Jake, which is just that we're so thrilled that there's so many fans of Decision Space. And that I think among listeners, it is a really beloved part of a lot of your weeks. And that makes us really proud. I would love to, I think a really strong goal for the podcast in this upcoming year, and something I want to put on other people's mind, is I would love for Decision Space to be nominated for the Golden Geek Awards. I don't even think we need to win. Just like reaching that nomination level, I think would be amazing for broadening the potential audience scope of Decision Space and also the types of conversations we could be having. So
Yes.
fingers crossed. I know that happens early in the year sometimes. I think it's like around March usually. So that's my stated goal for this year. I'm only going
Yeah.
to do one. And I'm so thankful to all of you who listen to the show. Clearly, if you're listening at this point, hearing about things that are coming, you're excited about the show too. And I just want to say thank you for being on this journey with us.
Yeah, be prepared for a lot of Golden Geek award season shilling.
Yeah.
That's gonna be our like big push early in the year. Still grateful for all the Patreon support. Still shooting for a 25 Patreon goal so we can do our like little YouTube videos of some of our favorite games in our own collection. But yeah, the Golden Geek that's goal number one for this year. I'm on board.
Really quickly too, Jake, to your point, I think we're super close on that Patreon goal. We need 4 more patrons and then we'll make that video. So that'll be
Yeah.
really cool. Oh, we also have a bonus episode to do because we got to 20 patrons. The Patreon support unlocked a bonus episode. So be on the lookout for that sometime in January or early February.
And we're just gonna put that in our main feed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
You'll
yeah,
see an episode published on a Saturday or something.
the Patreon supporters will pick the topic, but everybody will get to listen to it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a
Nice.
nice way to give back.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah.
I think that's cool.
Okay. The last thing I want to say for like the next 100 episodes, and this one's a little bit like to be determined, but I think it's something we maybe should consider, which is possibly like fewer feature game episodes. We sort of originally we basically did 2 feature game episodes, 1 discussion. Then towards the end of last year, or maybe for the most part of last year, we were kind of doing 2 discussion episodes, 2 game episodes. And I think potentially there could be some value and merit into like even pushing back something like 3 discussion based episodes to 2 game episodes, or maybe it's just putting a little bit more breaks in to our regular schedule. Nothing imminent at all at this point, but I think I was feeling a tad bit burnt out on just the sheer number of different games we were covering and deep diving. and I never want to get to the point with this show that it like feels anything other than like just like fun and a joy to do.
Yeah.
So I think one way we can sort of push back against that is by maybe being just like a touch more selective on the
Mm,
games we cover. So we don't cover, every new game that, every big quote unquote big game that comes out on Board Game Arena or Yucata just because it came out. And perhaps we can do like more, and perhaps being more selective could enable us to do more of like super deep dives like we did for Tigris and Euphrates, where we cover a single game over 2 episodes. And we've only done that once, but those are among like our most popular episodes ever in terms of downloads. Obviously, like we're covering a legendary game there, so that's going to help with downloads. I don't know if it's just the format that did it, but I think that's something that would be worth exploring more. And I think more, what I really think probably might help is just like more of those like sort of more personal episodes like interspersed throughout, which would be game episodes where we are covering the games we've been playing recently, events and updates in our lives, and like what gaming has been meaning to us, or how that's changing, what's happening with our game groups, that type of thing, that we can come on, still have a really fun and entertaining chat, but not necessarily something that we have to spend, dozens and dozens of hours preparing for each
yeah.
week.
I really like your idea of doing more double episodes, Jake. It's a lot of, I think it's more bang for our buck for our own time, but also for the audience. Like if we're covering a game over 2 episodes, there might be a larger percentage of the audience who might seek out to play that game, knowing that there's going to be 2 hours of discussion, really exploring it. And I think for some of the larger games, sometimes we get to the hour mark and feel like we have a solid 45 more minutes in us that we could go. And it'd be nice to have what could be a potential deep conversation that just gets missed, that we just kind of run past, give it the time to really breathe. I love that idea. And I also, yeah, I think that all sounds really natural. And the 3 topical to do 2 games might be more manageable. And also, people seem to really love our topical episodes. And I think ardent fans of the games we cover love the games we cover, but there's a lot of people who only check out the episodes of games that they've played, that's great. I think there's a niche for that, but we want to be economical with what we're discussing and how we're spending our time also.
Yeah.
Jake,
I think it's like a paradox, which is just like most people's favorite episodes are like the episodes where we cover games that they know and love.
yeah,
But like people's least favorite episodes are the episodes where we're like covering games they haven't played and don't care about. So
it's a rough, yeah,
so
it's a
it's
rough puzzle.
like nobody's favorites are the discussion ones, but like everybody likes them
Listens,
like
yeah.
70% or so. You know what I mean? It's like
But I
so
do
we'll
want to
we'll
say to
keep
listeners,
navigating that. We'll keep
yeah,
navigating it.
and that's what we've always done. So decision space will still be decision space. It's not going to be a different show. It'll just be the same show,
Yeah.
but slightly different. Jake, we're running out of
Better,
time.
better.
Yeah, better. I want to still get through that. I think we should rapid fire go through this list of games. So not do it how we would totally do it, but like 30 seconds or less.
Okay.
And then gauge our one of the things that we should include is like, I'm out of 10 excited to potentially cover this on the show. What do you
Okay.
think?
Let's do it. Perfect.
Okay. I'll do the first one. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the games that Jake and I think I won't speak for him, but I'm a 9 out of 10 excited to cover this on the show, is a domino game from Michael Kiesling and Wolfgang Kramer called Renature, in which you're playing these domino tiles to a shared board while also doing this area majority puzzle by trying to control things with different plants. There's not enough time to cover more about the game here, but it's really cutthroat, really fun, and really tense, and has a very unique decision space. So that's one that I'm very interested in.
Yeah. I'm like a 10 out of 10. Book it.
Great.
Let's
Boom.
book it. All right. The next game on our list, interesting one, Ticket to Ride by Alan R. Moon from back in 2004. Y'all know what Ticket to Ride is. Brendan, do you think this is something that we should cover on this podcast?
Okay, back in the day, we would cover classics. Like we covered Carcassonne and we covered, you know what I'm talking about. We
Yeah.
did others. I
Yeah.
want to cover Ticket to Ride because I think it'd be really interesting to tackle a game that launched tons of people into playing board games. And I also haven't played a lot of Ticket to Ride lately. So I think to play Ticket to Ride, I'm a 7 out of 10 excited, but covering it on the show, I'm an 8 out of 10.
Okay. Yeah. I think I would give it like a 7 out of 10. It's a
Okay.
game I've always really admired, a game I own, I recommend to people, but it's also like, am I excited to play the game? Like 5 out of 10.
Okay. We can't have a ticket to ride discussion right now. We have to move on.
I'm
I
just
want to talk to you
saying.
about it so badly.
I thought I was following the prompt. Okay.
You were doing good. I was going to break the rules and just talk to you about tickets to ride.
Okay.
Yeah, that was me. It was me.
Okay.
No. Okay.
Brendan,
This
come on.
next game, Jake, you got to talk about this next one because this
All
is
right.
a game selected by our patrons.
Yeah,
Where
so
are you at?
we're definitely covering Barrage. Let's just call it like Q1
Great.
2023. It's definitely happening. Yeah, it's a game I'm really excited to cover and play and talk about on this podcast. Maybe could that even be a double whammy? It's possible.
I think it
No
definitely
promises.
could. Yeah. I've played this game a bunch now, and I need to play it a bunch more.
Yeah.
I'm a 7 out of 10 excited, but I think if it clicks, I could be a 9 out of 10 excited.
Okay.
Okay, this next game is another one that everyone's banging down our doors to get us to cover. It's also a game that Jake owns and a game that came to BGG. It's a Wonderful World by Frederick Guerard? Gosh dang it. It's a Wonderful World by Frederick Guerard, and it was published in 2019. This is like a drafting engine building game. It's so much an engine building game. And I think I really love Seven Wonders. So for me right now, that's the drafting game that I'm going to go to as my bread and butter. But I'm going to try to settle into It's a Wonderful World to cover on the show. And I think for this, I'm an 8 out of 10 excited. If this game clicks for me, I could love it. Right now, I think it's too long.
What would you rather cover?
No, I want to cover it.
Would you rather cover this than Seven Wonders?
No, I'd definitely rather cover Seven Wonders.
So maybe we just do that.
I want to do both.
Okay, maybe we'll do both. Yeah, the
drafting special.
Yeah, we haven't done that many drafting games. We've done Blood Rage, we've done Sushi Go, so I think we could definitely add more to that. Both of these games are like so pure
drafting.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's engine building here too, but it's always interesting to see like how games that are on their face so similar, like the decision space can often feel quite different and diverge. So I think it's worth covering.
How excited are you? What's your number?
I think like maybe like a 7 or an 8. I don't know. I have like some slight reservations, I guess.
Okay, interesting. That's going to be an interesting episode. It really sounded like you were saying 7.
Yeah, maybe I was going to say
be a 6. Yeah. That's a new number.
Okay. Let's see. Where are we now? All right. Was it my turn? No, it's your turn.
Yeah. No, it's your turn.
My turn. Okay. So one game we might consider covering, it's really nice having super light games thrown in there because we can play them a lot and really get into the nuance of the decision space, which is often a lot richer than it seems on its surface. This one seems pretty small on its surface, and that's Coloretto, a Michael Schott game, who also designed Web of Power / Awari and Lucky Numbers. So yeah, very, very light set collection game. I played it exactly one time, but I loved it and immediately wanted to acquire a copy. So it's one where it's like, is it too small to cover? We always ask ourselves that, and then we always find out, no.
Yeah, we'll have it. We'll do a double episode on Coloretto for sure.
Yeah. Let's do 3, dude. Let's do a month.
Why not? Yeah, we'll do Coloretto, Azul, and reflecting on both. I'm a 10 out of 10 excited for Coloretto. I think it's just such a classic of classic card games, and it's so much the weight of game that I've interested in designing. So I want to cover it. I want to talk to Jake about it. Coloretto sounds awesome. The next one is Can't Stop, a push your luck game by Sid Saxon that is kind of like Coloretto in that it might be one of the lightest games we ever cover on the show. I'm just sort of curious if we could do an episode on Can't Stop and the decisions in it. It's more of a see what happens game than it is a make interesting decisions game. But a lot of times those episodes lead to interesting conversations. And I want to talk about Sid Saxon on the show. He's a really foundational, interesting game designer. And I think that there's room to do like a Sid Saxon Can't Stop episode combined. So wait, I'm 8 out of 10 because I can't win. Can't stop. I cannot stop.
We have a Can't Stop tournament going on right now in the Discord, and I think Brendan, correct me if I'm wrong, you're in dead last.
I'm the only person who has not won a game. Only person out of like 20 people. It's brutal.
Yeah. I don't know that we could like. I know what I just said was I don't know that this game can really fill a whole decision space episode, but I'd be love to be proven wrong, or maybe we combine it with some we talk about Can't Stop, and then we talk about Sid Saxoner, and then we talk about Push Your Luck in general, something like that. I
Yeah.
think it could work. I mean, and it's like so funny because it's like the biggest hit in our Discord of people that like presumably are like really really interested in decision space, and then they just like actually just all they do is play Can't Stop all the time.
I love it. Can't Stop's awesome. I was okay, we got to move on. I'm doing it again, Jake. The next
Yeah.
game that we're talking about, it is not Can't Stop. We can stop that. It is Root, a Cole Worley game. We haven't played or talked about mini war games on the show. We did cover Memoir 44, and this is also a highly asymmetric game. Root almost needs no introduction, I feel like. I've been playing it a little bit in the app, and there's another way that Jake and I have played it a little bit together. I know I'm more interested in covering Root than Jake is, so this isn't a guaranteed cover, and mostly I'm just excited to hear what Jake has to say. I'm probably on Root right now. I'm enjoying it as much as I enjoy like a pretty good sandwich when I'm hungry, but not like a really good sandwich.
Like a Subway.
Right, like yeah,
like you're
it's
hungry and you like go to Subway.
Exactly. It nourishes you, but it's not something to write home about. But I think
No.
the more I play Root, the
You
more
don't
I'll
like put it on your
enjoy it.
Instagram. Like, look
No,
what I
I'm
just
not
ate.
putting my exactly. Yeah. But with that said, I think Root would make an interesting double episode, and we don't a lot of times cover games like this. But what do you think, Jake?
I'm just like daunted by the prospect of covering Root because
Yeah,
of like even if what we'd have to do I think is be like, okay, we're just covering the base game and the base factions. But like even that feels like bigger than any other game we've attempted to cover because of how asymmetric it is. Like each faction has like truly its own decision
game.
space and
Yeah,
game that they're playing, which is something that like is super duper exciting to many people in the board game hobby, but not to me. You know, to
Jake's
me,
soul is dying.
right? Like when I play it, I'm just like, okay, but like I don't want to learn. I don't know. Like I just have such a hard time. Like I can figure out what my faction is doing,
Mm,
but then other factions are like doing very different stuff, and the amount of like energy it requires me to like understand what they're doing so that I can like engage with it in an interesting and profitable way. It's just like it feels like okay, I have to like learn the meta and gauntlet decks and Magic the Gathering, and that's like super duper fun and cool if like all you do is play Magic the Gathering or Root. But if it's like I'm just showing up at a game night and they're like, we're gonna play Root, I don't know. It just feels like too much.
Root's just living forest on steroids.
It's thematically very similar. I'll give you that.
So where are you? 2 out of 10?
On
1 out of
covering
10?
it, yeah, I would say like a 3.
3. Okay. Wow. How generous of you.
All right, next one. This one I think we should cover for sure, which is My City, Reiner Knizia's 2020 polyomino tile laying legacy game. We haven't covered any legacy games on the podcast, so I think that in and of itself would be a really fascinating conversation. Maybe a double episode. Maybe we talk about like the actual game and then we talk about like the legacy aspects and legacy games in general. Something like that would be like 10 out of 10 for that.
Also, you have this physically. You've played it with Bridget. I have
Yeah.
this physically. I want to play it with Maya. It
Yeah.
seems
I
like a
haven't
right
finished it.
opportunity.
We're like halfway.
Yeah, and we are like haven't opened it yet,
Okay.
but we want to. So that might be an interesting one to see if Maya and Bridget want to come on the show.
Yeah. Sounds
Okay.
good. That'd be really fun.
What's your number?
10. I already said 10.
10. Oh, dang it. And I'm a 9 out of 10. I'm really excited. But
yeah, because I'm like the big Knizia guy out of the two
exactly.
of us.
You're the big Knizia guy. And I'm just I like Knizia, but he's not quite there for me. You know, Feld.
You're like jury's still out. Like
yeah, exactly. It's the cover art. I don't know. So I'm a 9.
Okay.
The next game, this is one that Jake and I had talked about maybe wanting to cover cover some bigger games, but solo coverage of them maybe. So Jake and I would play the solo versions of those games and discuss them. And then maybe if one of us has played the game with people more broadly, we discuss them. So one of the games I think that we will probably cover for sure, I shouldn't say that, TBD, is Paladins of the West Kingdom. We want to get more Shem Phillips games covered on the show. This is one that Jake owns and that I own. I haven't played it yet, but I'm excited to delve into it. This is one that has a ton of fans. So I'm an 8 out of 10 on this. I don't play a ton of solo games, but I'm excited to explore that experience and sort of broaden my horizons.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm also not a big solo gamer, and this is one that has like the full on like complicated like Atoma
Automa. Yeah.
variant where you're like playing against somebody that's like simulating an opponent. And I just think covering something like that gaming experience that a lot of people, primarily play their games that way, would be interesting to cover on the show. So I think like for me, again, I'd be like 9 out of 10 excited to cover that on the podcast, like a 7 out of 10 for like playing it a bunch solo.
Yeah, totally.
Something less than that. Something less than what I am excited to talk about it. I added 2 more here, Brendan. So I'll just say them both really quick. Messina 1347, the new Suchi game. This one has been co-designed with Raul Fernandez Aparicio. That just came out recently on Yucata. I know we've covered Underwater Cities and shoot, I'm blanking.
Praga Kaput Redmi.
Thank you, Praga Kaput Regni. Previously, I think it's really fun to like cover the same designer multiple times. I think we've had pretty rich conversations about Feld games and Knizia games and Rosenberg games in the past, and Suchi I think is no exception. So I think one thing that this show can do in an interesting way is sort of like talk about the decision space, ludology of folks, and that would be another one that would fit right into that kind of legacy, and I would love to see how that one tries on for us. And then lastly, Ark Nova, a huge game in the hobby, one that we both have access to physically now. Funny story, maybe we'll talk about that on the podcast if we actually get to the point where we cover this. Maybe it's another one we cover solo just because it's difficult to get heavy games to the table in person for both of us. But I think, the biggest game of the past couple of years, without a doubt, currently number 4 on BGG, might be worth, just giving a little time to on this podcast.
Okay, so for my numbers, Jake, really quickly, Ark Nova, before the thing that Jake alluded to, that we're going to leave a complete mystery. Maybe we'll spoil it in our Discord. I was a 6 out of 10, but now I'm a 10 out of 10 excited.
Okay.
I'm really excited. And Messina 1347, on that game specifically, I'm a 7 out of 10, but on going back to Suchi, I'm a 10 out of 10. And I'm only a 7 out of 10 because I have no knowledge of anything that's going on except for that it's about the plague.
Yeah, I didn't say anything about that game because I don't know anything about it either.
But it's Suchi, so I'm excited.
I just saw it pop up on Yucata, and I'm like, hell yeah. We
gotta cover this. Yeah. It'll take a month and a half to play, like get really deep in it, but I'm excited.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I think, Brendan, that brings us to the end of episode 100. I just want to thank you for doing 100 episodes of this show with me. I know originally you were just going to be the guest for the first episode, and then I was going to find a new guest for episode 2. Clearly that didn't stick, so
I won't go
100 episodes later. Thank you for sticking around.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jake. I can't believe we've spent over 100 hours just having these conversations, and it's been a really awesome part of my life for the past 2 years, and I'm really thankful to get to have these conversations with you.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. And I guess we should also thank, as always, Hembry for our intro and outro music. I actually ran into lead singer Isaac Flynn back in Kansas in a restaurant over break, and he asked me, he's like, "You're still using our song?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Hell yeah."
You're like, "Let me get my phone out and play it for you."
He said, and he was also like, "Oh, we got some new stuff coming out that I think you guys might really like." So, maybe we'll mix it up at some point in the future. But truly, Isaac, thanks so much. That means a ton to us. And if you haven't yet checked out Hembry, the song Reach Out is one we always play. It has awesome music video on YouTube, but all their stuff's available on Spotify. Highly recommend you giving them a listen because they're awesome, great people to boot.
And come back next week for an episode we're calling Decision Space 101, where we're going to talk about a lot of the touchstone episodes in our first 100 episodes. And it'll be a the intent will be we're trying to create an episode that's a great starting place for decision space, where we can maybe codify some of the terms we've used and also just sort of reflect on the things that we've learned together throughout all this, and then onwards in 2023. Bye, y'all.
Bye.